Okay. Okay, good morning. Hemshech Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are close to the bottom of page 1228. I'll dedicate this class to our dear, beloved, and legendary Chazer Mashpia, Rabbi HaKoyen Khan, Alav Shalom, who passed yesterday on the 6th of Av. And yes, indeed, I consider him one of my mentors and colleagues as well. I worked with him very closely for a good 14 years, almost side by side, when we worked on the Chazara Sichos, preparing the Sichos. So obviously there's much I can share. I literally sat with him hours every day. So, however, there'll be a time for that. Right now, we're learning Ayin Beis, and he indeed was a legend in the sense of how he taught and explained Chassidus in a unique way that has shaped many thousands and thousands of people today. And I can talk more about my own experiences and what I've learned, but as I said, that requires more time. And we also had very enjoyable times as well. A lot of humorous moments. He had a good sense of humor, a Chassidus sense of humor. So suffice it to say that we're dedicating this class to him. And there'll be plenty of time to farbring about him and his contributions. So where are we here in Ayin Beis? I will tell you one thing about Ayin Beis. When I would speak to him about Ayin Beis, he always told me that Samach Vav was the sefer he grew up with as a bacher, so that affected his impressionable years. Ayin Beis, except for the beginning, most of it was all published already in Tafshil Amid Zayin. When Rabbi was already at that point, he was a what was that? If it was new 20, 30, 37 years old, still a young man. But he told me it was already like a second nature thing. So obviously he learned it, but not quite with the same type of immersion. And so a lot of the themes we talk about in Ayin Beis, I did speak to Rabbi from time to time about it. He was more familiar with the earlier volumes than this later volume, but still he was a baki in all of Chassidus. So I'm sure in some way it impacts my teaching here. So where are we up to in Ayin Beis? We're learning about the 3 stages of emotional development of the Nefesh Elikis, the Neshama Elikis, as he put it. So in Aveda, that would be beginning with a behavioral commitment, what we call Nihi, or we call Mutfa. Behavioral with another level, with some emotion, with some feeling, like he discussed on page 1225. Okay, but it's primarily that which is embedded and wired. Murgish is the feelings are coming now, emerging, especially after the Yemei Yanika, meaning after H2 begins to develop further and further. And here Seichel is beginning. There's already, even in the first stage, there's some recognition. In the first stage, actually, there's a minimal. But now comes recognition, cognitive recognition, to the point even in Aveda that there is not just the natural feeling toward the divine, because he said that can be fleeting. There's also his bananus, but his bananus is still very survival based, meaning since the God is Hu Chayecha, he's your life and source of sustenance and life force, therefore, Lahavas Hashem Alekecha ki Hu Chayecha, like we learned. Ki ato avinu. So in other words, it's how it relates and benefits us. Then comes the third level, what he called murgish mitzad seichel. And here seichel is becoming an independent force that contemplating on God itself, on God himself, arouses emotions. So the last thing we learned was exactly that there's the level of Helam and Gili, The murgish, the feelings, the emotions can be concealed and then be revealed. The seichel is concealed and then it becomes more revealed till the point where we have a seichel that's functioning and contemplating on godliness. So the Rebbe Rashab actually went into a contemplation on page 1228. And in detail, he spoke about his bonus. He began with one. We're soon going to learn several other forms of contemplation. But the first contemplation, he says, Oy, that's how we know that im sheis bonus of inyan isavus elements. The first his bonus was that we contemplate on the creation of the world. How all of it is only coming from a reflection. Like using the example of the artist. An artist makes a piece of art. What is that art compared to the core essence of the artist? So first of all, the art is only one piece of infinite possibilities. Second of all, the artist isn't defined by his art. He's beyond it. There are many things that the artist is beyond being an artist. And on and on. So basically, the creation of existence is a reflection of the divine. Malchuscha, only the outer reflection. He says, dibur, the esis hadibur. So that's the beginning of that is bonus, that it's only ha'ara. And it's not like a soul, and this ha'ara is not impacted by existence. By a soul in a body, the soul is impacted by mikre haguf, mispom and mikre haguf. The experiences of the body, pain, joy, in some way impact the soul. By the Eibishter does not impact it. He says, there's the inyan of a ched v'avan, where it causes silica air. He says that only causes the air to leave, but it's not damaged. If, for example, there's an injury to the body, to a container, the energy within it doesn't get damaged. Electricity just leaves. But then he says, but it does say that machtu li, that when you do a sin, it's like piercing me, like a needle that pierces godliness, so to speak, kavyachol. So he says that's only a reflection of a reflection. So all this is part of the contemplation of that the divine that manifests in existence, is only a reflection of the core of higher levels of the divine. Now, when a person thinks about that, so now the contemplation is not on hu chayecha, that you're recognizing that God is your life force and gives you sustenance. And since a person loves their life and they are attached to where they're getting their life from, so that's why there's a midah. So the midah is really about your survival. It's the midah is the ikar, and the seichel is just letting you know that God is your father and God is your source of sustenance. Now the contemplation is on God, how he's beyond us, actually. That all of existence is just a reflection. So this is ma'eir, an ava v'tshuka gdela, a love and a longing, and a deep longing for this gilia lekuz be'elam. That we want to have we want this part of God that's beyond us, meaning beyond just giving us life, should be nizgala be'elamis, as he says. So we should have a revelation of these things, and that should come revealed in the world. In other words, not just the divine reflection that gives the world sustenance, but also the divine that's more on God's terms, that is beyond the reflection that enters into existence. So that's the Ava. That's where we stopped. The parentheses, around 15 lines from the bottom of page 1228. Okay, so we're now in the level of what he calls Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel, because Seichel is driving this. This is a Hizbonus that's only capable, not by a child. This, you need to have a mind that thinks about these things. A child understands good and evil on a very basic level. This is dangerous for me, this is good for me. But if you want to understand the deeper meaning of Tevirah, like we said, the deeper quality, there we need a more mature mind, and that's what he's talking about now. So we're still in the middle of this Hizbonus. He's going to say something else, in the parentheses he's going to add. Then he's going to give two other examples of Hizbonus. On this level, what we're calling Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. Not Murgish on its own. There was a level of Murgish, but Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. Murgish the Midas, and there's Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. Okay. So Seichel is driving this, fine. So the basically, if you want to put it in different terms, every creature on earth has reflexive emotions when it comes to survival. An animal, for instance, reflexively sees danger, it runs away. Sees something it likes, it pursues it. It uses its seichel to hunt, to breed, but all the seichel is only an adjunct, a facilitator to help the animal achieve its survival needs, which are natural, embedded, and wired in it. In a human being, there's also the earlier stages of a human being, even though you can't compare a human completely to an animal, but there is that element of reflexive and impulsive emotions. However, the mind is needed to guide it, to make you aware, and so on and so forth. But it's still around that survival. Now we're talking about what makes a human being unique. We raise our eyes to heaven. Doesn't use that expression here, but basically we can contemplate on our creator, not just as our creator is good or bad for us, meaning the creator being a force that is healthy and productive for the human being, or doing something against the creator's will, which is destructive. So now, in continuing the hisbonenus that we just said, the ava and the tshuka, gdela, that is awakened through contemplating on the higher dimensions of godliness. So he says like this: this is similar to what we spoke earlier. So let's just refresh what we learned. If you remember, back on page, let's see what page it was, where he spoke about why creation could only come through Malchus, not through the Midas. I believe it's on page 1216, where he says actually, no, I'm sorry, 1214. So he said there, the Ikris Avas Elam is from Malchus. Why? Because creation needs a certain distance from the creator. If the creator's attributes are revealed, he said, B'chinas Kiruv, Lo Yoyev Shaliyas Avas Elam is because they're B'chinas Kiruv. In order for there to be creation, you need two things. You need a creative force, but you need the creative force to be somewhat removed. And Malchus is more removed because it doesn't reveal, Malchus doesn't reveal the attributes of the one who's a melech. It's just a melech. It's his authority, as we learned there. So based on that, we said that the midas are bechinas kiruv. That's the giluyim min ha-nefesh. And Malchus is not the giluyim. Malchus is more concealed. The etzem ha-nefesh, Malchus reaches all the way to Keser and to the Ratzon, because that's what the Eibishter wants. Like he says at the end of the page. I'm looking at the bottom of page 1214. So he's now referring to that in context of what we're saying here. And he's saying the following. Val derechshen is bar le'il on page 1214. The midas al yenis and bechinas kiruv. The midas al yenis, so God's attributes, for example, chesed. Chesed is God doing chesed with his people, with his creation. That's kiruv. What does kiruv mean? He's revealing and expressing love and kindness. Same thing with gvura, same thing with teferes, and same thing with all the midas. V'hashpa mehem hi b'chinas gili. So it's in a form of kiruv, and also the hashpa is in a form of gili. It's not a helam. It's an attribute. It's a divine attribute. L'cha Hashem tzedakah. When God does tzedakah with us, or chesed, he's showing kindness and blessing us, and it's revealed. It's close and revealed. B'chinas kiruv. Creation, for instance, is b'chinas richuk, because creation is only the creation of existence. It's not God revealing himself to existence. He's creating. It is also coming ultimately from God's kindness, but its expression is not the revealed expression of kindness. It's a creation of God's, which focuses on the creation aspect. Okay. The ima yesh, so this is al derech shel bar le'il. So we said, okay, let me read a line before the parentheses so we understand the flow. So he's saying, so this is bananus awakens and stimulates ava v'tshuka gdela liyas gila lekuz be'elam and she agili mimadregas al yenis shows ye gili be'elam. In other words, creation itself is the behavior, the lower level. You're only getting a reflection of the divine. The dibura elyon, yehi rakia, and it's only a reflection, and it's not revealing the deeper dimensions of godliness. It's how godliness is relating to you. It would be like a teacher and a student, just as an example. And the teacher is coming down to the level of the student, explaining an idea. Very good. So the student has a love to the teacher, an appreciation for what you explained. But then the student gets a little older and says, 1 second, my teacher has a lot more to give than just teaching me Aleph Beis or whatever it is that I learned on my terms. I want to know what this teacher is about. And he begins to probe, begins to contemplate, and becomes drawn to wanting to know what the teacher is like, not what you taught me. I want to know what you're thinking on your own, so to speak. Just as an example. So now you're drawing and being attracted to a connection. The beginner student doesn't yet appreciate or know even that there are those dimensions. He definitely doesn't have the capacity to contemplate, even if he does know. But a more mature student does have that capacity. So that's creating a tshuka gdela, a ava tshuka gdela, that dimension should be revealed in existence. And here's the parentheses. He says, al derech midas al yenis. In other words, we don't just want malchus. Malchus is the creative energy that we thank God. Thank you for creating us. Thank you for sustaining us. Hu chayecha, toivli, through malchus, God sustains the universe, and we appreciate it. But now we want to have something more. We want a gilia lakus from a higher level. So he says that's al derech the midas al yenis that we learned about earlier, which is kiruv, and their ashpah is in the form of gilui. So now the Rebbe Rashab says, okay, fine, but didn't we say that Hisavas Elam can't come from that level because it's too close? So he's going to answer, and that's why I gave the example of the student. In the beginning, you can't receive it, because if the existence was created from Chesed and from the Midas Al Yenis, existence would not be independent. But once it's independent, once the student has independent space and he grows, now he can access even levels that before would not have been accessible, because he wouldn't have been, if the teacher had revealed to the student all he knows or higher levels of what he knows, the student would have been overwhelmed. Now that the student has received the basic, what we call here the ha'ara of the ha'ara, reflection, now we can go deeper. That's what he's going to answer. So he says, V'agam, v'ima yes, rather. And even though canal, and even though from the midas al yenis, like basically Zoh, you can't have the creation of the worlds because it's too close. That's why you need the Helam of Malchus. After the world was created through Malchus, now we start growing and we can expand our containers and receive Gili that's even higher than just the basic amount of divine energy. So to put it in the language that we all understand very well, the Eibishter, in order, Ein Sof filled all of reality. For there to be an independent consciousness, you need the tzimtzum. Without the tzimtzum, we can't understand how there can be an independent consciousness that's completely submerged in the omnipresence and omnipotence of a divine consciousness. Tzimtzum. But the point of the tzimtzum is there should come a kav, which is a thin ray of light that streams from teacher to student. So now the chol l'mokim, that space is able to receive that diminished energy, and slowly the containers expand and expand to the point that we can reach and access the divine energy even before the tzimtzum, as we learned at length, to the point where you can transform the tzimtzum. But that can't happen on day one. That would be like saying, teaching a 2-year-old through Aleph Beis, you're going to teach them whole Ayin Beis, all Chassidus, all Torah, everything. But Derech HaTeva, that's not possible. As we learned, the Nefesh Elikis goes through stages. Everything goes through stages of growth. But once the tzimtzum happened, then you could start drawing that energy, and to the point you could even get energy that's pre-tzimtzum. That's just in a broader sense of the word. It's actually the question of the Eitz Chaim. The Eitz Chaim asked the question, or the Samach Vav asked the question, that if the air is going to come back anyway, why do you need the tzimtzum in the first place? Because the first thing is you need kelim. If there's no keli, you won't be able to draw that energy in. So he's basically saying, and this is more on a microcosmic level, that after you have the creation that came from concealment, or from ha'ara to ha'ara, as the contemplation dictates, this contemplation that we're discussing testifies to, Then you come the Ava V'Tshuka to get more Gili, like the Midas, and that's possible after the world was already created. Yachaliyas Agili. U'kamay Shahi Agili Bebeis HaMikdash, like Gili Alakuz Bebeis HaMikdash, as it was the divine revelation of the Holy Temple. Ochein Yesh Havai B'Mokim Hazeh. Let's dein Asad Hedyet. U'kamay Shekosov Mokim Acher. So when Yaakov Avinu discovered that this is a place where you don't just have Gilel Elikus, Yesh Havaya b'Mokim Hazeh, and the Targum teaches they're less than Asar Hedjit. This holy temple, the Temple Mount, is not Asar. Asar is a Mokim. It's not a regular space. He came to realize this is not a regular place. The world, the regular world, the world on its own, the divine is concealed. But in this Mokim, you have a special extra Gili. The Gili of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not Asar Hedyot. It's not a regular space. It's a special holy place. Okay. So this is a dogma that he's saying, the creation of the world, but then you could have a Gili that's more than just the Gili from Malchus, in the language that he said, or the language of the Gili of the Ha'ara, that we actually have Giluyim from higher levels. And that's what the Ava and the Tshuka that's born out of a contemplation, that you realize that God has these dimensions. And therefore you yearn for them and you long for them. You're not satisfied with just God sustaining you and giving you food and drink and the life. You want to have the revelation of higher levels of this eloquence. It's the same thing like in a relationship with two human beings. Two people love each other, and as they grow, they come to discover deeper dimensions of the other person, and you want to connect with that. You don't just want the basic functional relationship. You want a deeper and deeper one, and that's what he's talking about here. So now we have that the hisbananus, in that existence is only a reflection of a reflection, and that's why we want to have more of the divine. Now the Rebbe Rashab is going to give another hisbananus. That was one. Creation. Here's another hisbananus. Ukamoy Kain, and so too, kishmizbayin begdulas Hashem, being hisavos. Till now, we spoke about the way God creates. What does He create? He creates through a reflection. Same thing. So too, when you contemplate on the greatness of God, God's awesome power in creation, the very creation is such a tremendously awesome, wondrous thing. We're not talking now about that we are only a reflection and we want more of that godliness. That the very creation is a nifla ma'id, davar nifla ma'id. Inya nifla ma'id. U'kamoshin is bar le'il. Where was kamoshin is bar le'il? I think it's also in that section, or maybe earlier. But regardless, so the hafla of Bria Yesh Ayin. In other words, there's a Maimar Chazal that says, even if all the wise people of the world and all the scientists came together, they couldn't even create the wing of a fly. You know, like that joke where the scientist says to God, we don't need you anymore. We can do everything you can do. So God says, show me. So the scientist takes a clump of earth from the ground and says, I'll show you. I'm going to use this earth and I'll make something grow from it. And God says to him, hey, use your own earth. In other words, what's the chiddush? You're taking my earth that already has all the nutrients or whatever the earth has, the koyach et semeach. Human beings have no capacity to create something yesh ma'ayin. So one of the haflaws of creation is the mere fact that only God can do such a thing. Because since God is not yesh and not ayin, He can create completely new reality that didn't exist before. We can only reshape things. Like He says in Perek Beis in Shiur V'Amunah, yesh mi yesh. Give me a piece of gold, I can turn it into a beautiful ornament. A piece of clay, whatever. Technology, we turn it into tremendous machines. It doesn't mean it isn't wondrous. Look at modern technology. Look at medicine. But no one created it completely from scratch. Modern technology is utilizing subatomic energy and electricity. That's all God's creations. We just learned to tap into it and to harness it and channel it for our benefits. So when you think about the hafla of creation, that itself is an amazing thing. And yet, look at this. Despite how great it is, the im, he says, so it's called nifla ma'ed, the im calls eksiv, Eisa Pella. Eisa Pella. The diuk here is, she'etzlei baruch hu b'chinas asiyah levad. For him, it's just another little thing. Eisa Pella. Okay, Eisa Pella literally means he does wonders. But here he's being medayik in the word Eisa. That for the Eibishter, it's only asiyah levad. It's like comparing a human being, your mind, your emotions, all your superior qualities, and then you take, let's say, and you just pick up a pencil, for example. That's an asiyah. What's that asiyah compared to all your qualities? It's trivial. So as much as the creation is a pella, it's still Eisa Pella. So it's true. There's a simple interpretation means he creates wonder, but it also means Eisa, for him, it's just an asiyah. It's just another thing, another trivial act. So besides the fact that no one can create, only God, even creation for the Eibishter is only asiyah. Literally, like for us, the complete triviality, something completely trivial compared to what the relative to what the Eibishter really is. So this is all another contemplation that the creation is a pella, dover nifla ma'ed, inya nifla ma'ed, and that too is only an asiyah. The gam kol hagiluyim, and the contemplation continues, and so too in all the revelations. Afilu be'elim esanifloyim. So this you could say, okay, fine. This material world for God is trivial because it's a very lowly world. There's not a lot of giluyim. It's just action. It's just like if you ask somebody who's a brilliant scientist and they went and they I don't know, made a coffee, you'd say that's trivial compared to what they're capable of doing. But what about the Elam Esalyenim? Elam Esalyenim, you could say that all the Giluyim and Afil Be'elam Esalyenim, Hanifloyim, Be'elam Esanifloyim, V'hainu Af B'chinas Almin Stimin. There are also worlds that are far greater than our world. We're talking about in Giluyim, not the Kavanah. We're not talking about Dirra B'tachtenim, that God wants the lowest of worlds and it has Koyach Ha'atzmus. We're talking about in Giluyim. There are worlds that are awesome worlds, that are like think of the sun. The sun is a very powerful star, but there are stars in the solar system that are 1,000 times stronger than the sun. Just as an example. So in Elamus Nifloim, Beruchnius, obviously, and Almin the Stim in the concealed worlds, that too, no matter how wondrous they are, from the Eibishter's point of view, it's all a trivial action. It's just another act, like another, as I said, using your fingers to another step, if you wish, compared to what the Eibishter is. So what is this? Now this contemplation, now through this, this is another cause from becoming very excited and very stimulated by elikus. So we have now the second contemplation. The first one was how distant we are, even though there's an overlap, but there the focus was, it's only ha'ara, only a reflection, and we want to have higher levels of godliness. Now we're talking about the hafla, the wonder of creation, the wonder of all the worlds, all of the wonders, and all of the giluyim. As great as it may be, it's all asiyah, levad. It's only like a trivial act in context of God. So that causes a mispal me'ed al elikus. So you can imagine, what is elikus? If elikus is beyond all that, it stimulates and arouses deep feelings. And now one more is bonus. Oi, she'izbonesi. This is a third type of isbonus. Shemizbeinen be'eza hasog elikis. Okay. Till now we spoke about the general existence, which is only a reflection, or the very wonder and the davar nifla, the awesome element of all of creation, all the worlds, is all only like an action in front of God. Now he's saying you could also contemplate on a particular divine concept, or divine idea. Mizbein be'ezah soga lekis. That you're mizbein on a. He's going to give examples in a moment in the parentheses. Shu inyan hadas. This is das. You're using your mind. You're using your perceptive mind. We say understanding. You're knowing. Your perception and knowledge. Leides Hashem, to know God. Biyadiyah v'asoga teva be'ezah inyan eliki. With a solid and good fundamental knowing and comprehension in some divine matter. Kamoi, in the parentheses, he gives examples. And he doesn't always give examples, but here we have examples. Kamoi, ba'eres v'kelim, contemplating on the eres and kelim, how God created eres and kelim, energies and containers. So I'm going into detail, but that's your contemplation. So it's Eze Inyan Eliki. We're not talking now about all of creation and the process of creation or how God creates or the wonder of creation. We're talking about now Eres V'Kelim. Ubeprate hamadreges b'esses spheres d'Atzilus. And the detailed levels of the 10 spheres of Atzilus. Ubeprate Elemes Elyeni. And the specifics of the higher worlds. Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiyah. So in other words, he's giving examples of specifics. Each one of them deserves a contemplation, a soga. That's what he's contrasting. We're not talking now how it relates to the worlds. We're talking about is in yonim atzma. You're learning about eres v'kelim, not as it relates to existence, like what its role is in the creation of existence. Before we were talking the relationship of God and existence in both contemplations. Now we're talking about the things themselves, specific details, Eris and Kalim, 10 spheres, the worlds. So we're talking about Hainu Banyanim Atzma, the Eze Inyan Eliki, Sheba Soga Teva, Uba Mokas Hadas, that with a good and solid understanding, and with in delving, immersing yourself with your das, concentrating deeply, Nirgash Ma'oid Benafshe, is felt deeply in his heart, or very nirgash ma'oid benafshe. He strongly feels hayeker, the value, the preciousness, the tayerkeit, the preciousness, the value, va'ili, and the quality and the superiority and the specialness. The inyan halaki, in this inyan halaki that he's contemplating on, whether it's eris and kelim or whatever it may be. And this contemplation causes him to be in a state that he now relates to it. So he's close to it. Once you think about it and understand it, you begin to relate to it. It's not some distant idea. And so it becomes a kiruv and a dveikus, even more than kiruv. Dveikus is a cleaving, attaching. By inyan aliki, and this inyan aliki. So the more you contemplate, the more you hamokas hadas he uses, which means concentration to the point, like we learned, that you personalize it. If you remember, v'yedaita yom, not just chachma being a das, that it's intimate, from the word iskashrus, v'yoda, that you become a keshet omitz, like he says in Tanya. We learned this earlier. So that causes that you become close and attached to this inyan eliki that you contemplated on. I'm going to just finish the paragraph. We're on top of page 1229, and then I'll stop for questions. So this is the third way he's explaining, well, the third type of hisbananus in the specifics of particular divine entities, if you wish, or divine realities. Eris and Kalim, the Spheris, the Elemis, that's all examples. There can be other things as well. And you become connected to that. So before the Ava V'Tshuka was one, is that you want more revelation of the divine. In the second contemplation is that you are, what the word was, Yunispol Ma'id. You become very excited about godliness that's beyond it all. And here you're getting connected to these godly entities that you are contemplating on. Ubefrat, and specifically, Kishmizbeinim B'Gedulas Hashem, when he contemplates on the greatness of God, B'Riboy Heishtalshlus, in the multitude, the Riboy Heishtalshlus, the many, many, many levels, B'Prote HaMadreges, in all the specific levels, Minat Simtsum Arishin, from the first Simtsum, the first concealment, Ad B'chinas Malchus, the Malchus Da'asiyah, all the way down to Malchus of Malchus Asiyah, from the top all the way down to the bottom of Ishtalshalis, and now all of it is null and void before him. Now through this, Yislav Libre, his heart becomes a flame, fired up. Yislav, like a lav, like a flaming fire. Libre is hard, ba'ava kirish be'esh, with a love that's like a burning fire. Ba'atzmus ein sof baruch hu, a fire and passion toward atzmus ein sof baruch hu. Doesn't mean in atzmus. It means that the heart is burning up with ba'atzmus ein sof baruch hu in this contemplation, which is now a fourth level, a fourth contemplation that he calls ubafrat, that you contemplate on all these levels. Now, this has some similarity to the second contemplation, where he said that all the worlds, the flyim, are all asiyah compared to God. That's the kalachashiv. But here he's adding that you're also contemplating on the multitude of levels. That's so many levels, everything from Tzimtzum Arishin. You go through all of Chassidus, all the levels, the Tzimtzum, the Kav, the Reshima, the Kav, Ak, Akudim, Nekudim, Vrudim, Atzilas, Bri, Yitzir, Asiyah. And each one of them, the spheres, all the way to Malchus of Asiyah. And we talk of the Parsayas and the partitions in between, and many levels I didn't even mention. All this is all nullified before him. Says this causes, now he speaks a stronger type of emotion. Till now he didn't use the word Islahev, which is like fire, and Avakarish Be'esh, and Atzmusein Baruch Hu. Atzmusein Baruch Hu. So here clearly he's saying, and that's why Ubafrat, this contemplation leads to a fiery passion. And all this is only doable and possible when you're using seichel. This can't be just the natural midas, because the natural midas, as we spoke earlier, are much more on a more diminished or more undeveloped level. They talk more about behavioral or about sustenance. This is clearly a seichel that is stimulating emotions that are not just there. They may be embedded deep, and so we didn't learn yet. But right now, he's calling this the Murgish Mitzad HaSeichel. Okay, so I finished the top of the paragraph, page 1229. Good time to stop if anybody wants to ask anything or comment. And I think it's pretty clear, but still, there's always, I'm sure, things to develop further. Any thoughts, any questions? Okay. Now, of course, can we go back to our davening and our avodah and actually implement this? That would be the next challenge. Any one of these is bonus. Can you actually use it in a way and actually awaken emotions as he's describing here? That would be nice. Then this mimer would really come alive in the fullest sense of the word. The next section is a little more complicated. When I say complicated, a little more technical and dense, because the Rebbe Rashab is now going to connect this to different places in Tanya and Chassidus to discuss different ways that they understand Moichin and Midas. So just as a small introduction before we read further, I want to refer you back, if you remember, the bottom of page 1221, when he started speaking in Aveda, what is Nihi in Aveda? Even before he got to Mutfe, Murgish, and Muskel. So he said, what is Nihi in Aveda? He said, a heskem li'asur merav asei tev. The commitment, the thing that said, the determination, it's a heskem, an absolute determination to fulfill behaviorally what God wants. Sur merav asei tev, the Pa'el Mamish. And he said, ein bezeh shum ispailas ava v'yirah. We're talking about the lowest level, pure action, like someone who just does mitzvahs without any feeling at all. It says clearly, so even though Ava V'yirah is the mocker for mitzvah sesa, mitzvah leisesa, but in the case of this individual, just doing the basic minimum. Rak masha mismaskim belibe, beheskim chazuk liasur merav asei tev. Umemeli says it doesn't have any chayis and enik. It doesn't have any vitality and pleasure. It's just action. It's like someone just following orders. It's completely mindless and emotionless. Okay. Then he said, in the he itself, there's a madrege elyono yeser. There's a reason I'm summing that up, because he's going to refer to this Tanya. What's the madrege elyono yeser? This is chapter 16 in Tanya. So if you look in chapter 16, he says, and he quotes here a big section of it. He says there's another level that's not just pure action. So he actually talks about two levels there. One where the emotions are more impact on you, and one where your mind and your emotions are active and they appreciate godliness. But they have not been internalized. They're not your driving force. It's almost like a philosopher or a thinker or even someone who has emotions appreciating something from a distance, that it's a good thing. That's what he says, ye'osa. It's worthy. It's masim. It's worthy of value. So I just want to briefly just sum it up. So you see there that in mutva itself, in the he itself, you have one level that's purely behavior, literally like a newborn child that just is not even, there's no active, deliberate move. The child everything is reflexive and impulsive. In comparison to a child who already has an emotion that is driving him, a feeling, some recognition, and so on. So he says like this, quickly. Also gamken in the he, shalev mevin beruach chochma bina shebemeche, that the lev understands in his mind the greatness of God, the kula kamei kalach hashem mamish, the same lashon we just learned. You understand with your mind that everything is nullified before God. Al-Ken Ye'oshalei. And that's why it's fitting for him. That's why it's fitting. What's fitting? That God is fitting to be someone that you should want to yearn for. If you, for example, conceptually know that something is extremely special and indispensable, you know that's worthy for me to go commit myself to it. But that doesn't mean you feel it in your bones. It just means you appreciate it either emotionally or intellectually. So he says, Halev mevin beruach chochma bina, that it's worthy. V'gam nafshe v'ruche. Kachi also lehem lias kolis elov. I want to just see realization. But practically speaking, it translates into action. That you commit your tadyag mitzvahs, that everything is following that, but it's all yediyah levad leib'chinas hasoga mamish. It only he knows about it, and that's why maskim b'meiche v'libay v'nigmar etzlei shekach yosel lechavke u'lekayim kol ha'tagyag mitzvahs. But this is all he calls heidah b'lvad. You're just acknowledging it, and you're turning it into action, but has not turned you into a living, emotional, passionate force, creature, passionately connecting to God. It's all still in your mind or your heart, and your heart. Okay. And Chagasi goes on, is Ispilus Hamidus, that you actually get excited. I gave the example when we learned that. It's like somebody, for example, you see this very often, people date someone, and everything is right, but you don't feel excitement. You just say, you know what, it's all right on paper. This is a great person to be married to. Be a great mother or a great wife, or a great husband, a great father. But it hasn't yet ignited the emotions in the fullest sense of the word. So that's what we learned back then on page that I just referred to, that I just read from, was page, what did I just read from here? Page 1221 and 1222. So now let's read on here. So he says, V'chol zeh, the Rebbe Rashab. I'm continuing from page 1229, the new paragraph. V'chol zeh, everything we just discussed, which is the contemplation that leads to an emotional inspiration, who is said to sa'ava haboy de sogav izbanus. All this is an awakening of love that comes through comprehension and contemplation. not the other way around. In the first two levels, mutva and murgish, it comes from the natural seated, deeply seated, natural wiring of the individual, of the divine soul. And that's revealed in murgish through contemplation, that just enough to reveal that God is your father, God is your life force. Here is the other way around. The Ava came through Asog of his bonus. Had you not contemplated on these four different contemplations that he discussed here, you wouldn't have had this passionate, emotional reaction. So now I'm going to read the parentheses is what I really was going to focus on. The parentheses goes until it's around 10 lines. To be exact, 3, 6, 9 lines. Till Chulu. So he's going to now, in the parentheses, he's going to explain this in context of Tanya and a few different places and demonstrate that there's different ways that this is explained in Chassidus. He says, B'Sefer Shabbein in Perik Mem Daled, says the Rebbe Rashab, in chapter 44 in Tanya, it says the Ava Shaydei Bonus, the Chi'ato Avinu, that the love that comes through contemplating Ato Avinu, what we called before Murgish, Mitzad HaMurgish, Mitzad Midas, and it's a Seichel only enough to get to awaken that feeling. He's the Chihu Chayecha, that is contemplation. The Ava that comes to contemplation, that he's your father and he's your life force. Chayecha, he's your sustenance. Einon nikra dechila rechumot, einon nikroim dechila v'rechimotivim. In chapter 44 in Tanya, he says that's not called natural. Dechila rechimu is Ava and Yira. It's not called natural love and awe. Elo kishem b'meiche b'machshavte levad. It's not called natural love. Only when do you call it tivim? One second, let me just make sure I got that right. So they're not called natural chirachim, ela kashem b'meicha machshavte levad. Hamavur beperik tazayin. So perik tazayin, he said clearly that it's only in meicha machshavte levad, right? Because he didn't really feel it. Like we said, it's not felt. He understands it's the right thing. It's appropriate. So he says that's not called chilur chimativim, elkshem machshavte levad, which is explained in perik tazayin. Not sure what he's saying here. Let me read a few more lines. But when they're revealed, when they become revealed in his heart, nikraim reusa deliba. Then they have a different name. They're not called natural midas. They're called reusa deliba, the desire of the heart. Because I don't want to make a mistake, I think I'm going to stop here because I want to look inside Tanya and understand it better, because I see here need a little more research. At first I thought I understood what he was going to say, but now I realize. So you know what? It's 10:30 anyway. So I will stop here. If somebody wants to ask something, let's do that, and then we'll end here. Sunday, there won't be a shiur because of Tisha B'Av, so we'll resume on Monday. But anybody want to ask anything up till, I mean, I really didn't add anything now more than what we learned. And this piece, we're going to go over anyway. So unless you want to ask something, I'm going to stop here.
He is explaining in the next few lines that this is the difference between Mutma and Murgash. The TV
I know, but I would need time to learn it, and now it's not much time for that. So that's why I said I want to look into the Tanya, and then we'll learn it. We'll get to it. He's distinguishing between Tanya and what he says Lufia Mavur Khan. There's clearly some different way of explaining it, but I want to explain it properly. So I'm going to look in the Tanya. I'll get back. On Monday we'll continue. So let me stop here. Top of page 12.